So I haven't played a Sonic game probably since I was 8 years old, and that is putting it very lightly. As someone who knew a lot about Sonic Generations, I was actually the only person that I actually knew who played it on the 3DS port. Yep, not even the best port of Sonic Generations, yet I played it on probably the worst console at the time. But of course, I still know the story of the Xbox 360 and PS3 ports of the game, which I pretty much sat and watched on YouTube for most of my childhood. And when the announcement came that Sonic and Shadow Generations was coming out, I was like, holy shit, this might actually be one of the best Sonic games of all time. And oh boy, was I right. They completely went ahead and remastered the whole game, including us giving us a brand new Shadow campaign along for the ride. And I easily will say now that Shadow is definitely the best part of this game, but I will give you more on that later. When this game originally came out in 2011, it looked flawless either way. I really didn't expect to have a remaster even after 10 years of this actually being out. And the game visually on PS5 looks flawless with the brand new remaster either way. Each stage always feels refreshing and new depending on which Sonic you play as. And I gotta say, this is probably the second best Sonic game with the best boost mechanic for modern Sonic. The boost sequences in each of Act 2 for Modern Sonic has got to be some of the best parts of this game. The boost can get a little bit clunky at times, especially when trying to turn, but it's actually a flawless mechanic anyone can actually get the hang of if they put their mind to it. Classic Sonic's levels are definitely some of the best in the series, especially the spin dash being a very great move that you can actually use in any level, and if you know how to use it correctly, it is an absolute breeze to get through all of the levels. In comparison to Modern Sonic, I do think Classic Sonic is a slightly better to control, but that's probably because it's just mainly a side-scroller and not a full-on 3D experience. Throughout each levels they have introduced Chows and the already red rings from the original game. Trying to get all the collectibles in each level is a little bit of a pain in the ass, especially if you're a first timer in Sonic Generations and you haven't really played any of these levels and know the layouts of them, and if you do want 100% in this game, these will be required for the 100% completion. Man, they just had to go and ruin it with that, god damn. Just like last generation, there actually is a lot of different types of challenges to complete, and if you want to progress to the next boss fight, you will have to complete a few of these. Now it is clear these are just filler for the game, as of course the game is very short in itself, but in my eyes, I really don't mind it. And these challenges also help to improve your gameplay and get better at the game, which is actually not too shabby. Each of the Generations maps always have something new and fresh to offer on each level. If you ask me, Crisis City and Rooftop Run are some of the best levels in Sonic Generations, whether that's jumping between buildings or going extremely fast through tight spaces. And if you're asking what I think of Planet Wisp, seriously, fuck that level. But now, let's move on to the bosses. Metal Sonic is the first boss in this game that you fight, and he's relatively easy to beat. A few bonks on his head after speeding up to you real quick, and eventually you've pretty much got him. The Egg Robo is pretty much very simple. All you have to do is make Eggman destroy some of these bombs, destroying his arm, crawling up his arm, and then eventually going right at his big bald ass robot head. That's pretty much the whole boss battle, and it's fairly simple like I said. Perfect Chaos is a phenomenal boss fight. Even after 13 years, I think the visual of this boss fight looks even better than it did before. I always feel they could have done more with Shadow, as he's pretty much one of the best characters in the Sonic franchise, when all you really did in this boss fight is level up a little couple of times and pretty much destroy the shit out of him, which is absolutely wild, man. Like, your take on the ultimate life form here and you've just turned him into deep fried toast. Like, what the hell's going on here? The Egg Dragon boss fight is very simplistic, and I don't know how I failed at this so many times. There really isn't any problems with this boss fight, but it's just really repetitive like a lot of the bosses on this list. And I really think the only great boss fight in Sonic Generations is Silver the Hedgehog's. Unlike any of the other bosses on this list, the Silver the Hedgehog was actually very strategic, and you actually had to figure out a way how to actually clear this guy without actually hitting you with a goddamn car. And not to mention the big massive scrap heap boulder that he tries to attack you with at the end of the level. Like, Jesus Christ, that was crazy. And to top it all off, even takes place in Crisis City, which is just a major plus right there. And when it comes to the Sonic Generations final boss, it's definitely very mixed. Like many of the other boss fights, the Time Eater boss fight is no different when it comes to being repetitive. The main premise of the boss is probably very self-explanatory. You hit him in once, he backs off, you hit him again, he backs off. It's just really trying to boost into his stomach multiple times until you finally destroy his orb. But one thing I do like is the collaboration between both Sonics in this level. It utilises their powers very well, and it definitely shows that both Sonic can actually do very well between a boss fight. But in conclusion, Sonic Generations Remastered does a lot of good things right. By Sega adding in more stuff into the game has actually allowed more people to explore these levels that everyone knows and loves. Yes, the story dialogue may be a bit different, but the whole levels design is still there, and all the levels that we once used to know are all back, which is pretty much a major plus right there. And even if you haven't played Sonic Generations on PS3 or Xbox 360, I highly recommend just to jump in and give this one a go. If you aren't really a Sonic the Hedgehog fan, you're probably bound to love these games nonetheless. And this just makes it seem like Sonic Unleashed will eventually get a remaster in the future if this is the way they're going to be continuing to remaster various Sonic games. Even if you're not all for upgrading your character just yet at the shop, or even collecting all the red rings and the chows, you're bound to still have a good time with the game nonetheless. But without further ado, I'm going to give Sonic Generations Remastered an 8.5 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed the experience, but let's move on to the secret sauce of this video. And of course, I'm talking about Shadow Generations. This has got to be one of the best Sonic games that I've probably ever played. Now if you ask me, this is the really main selling point as to why you should buy this collection. Not only because Shadow is an absolute badass, but the level design this time around is far superior and the graphics just look gorgeous. This Shadow story of course takes place around the same time as Sonic Generations, meaning where Shadow was all this time while Sonic Generations was actually happening. We do see some flashbacks to that game, tying in both games together, and this is how Shadow ends up in his own version of the White Space. Now the White Space is definitely one of the highlights of this game, and I'm going to get into more of that later. But while in the White Space, this is where Shadow runs into some brand new levels from new and old Sonic games. Now in my opinion, I think Shadow's levels are so much more thought out compared to Sonic Generations levels. And just like Sonic Generations, you are split up to between both acts, like Act 1 and Act 2. Obviously going between 2D and 3D, and I gotta say the 3D sections are some of the best 3D sections in the Sonic franchise, and I'm not even bloody debating right here, this is like complete facts. And you will definitely be here for a long time seeing all the shortcuts that this game has to offer within every single level. Now Shadow may not be as fast as Sonic, but he does have various new abilities in this game exclusively. And this is where we get introduced to the brand new Doom powers. Now within the campaign you do get 5 Doom powers. These consist of Doom Surf, which allows you to surf on water, Doom Blast, allowing you to blast your enemies into oblivion or various walls, Doom Spears, which allow you to actually hit various enemies with various multiple shots, Doom Morph, which will allow you to climb up various walls throughout the White Space using the old Doom's DNA, and finally Doom Wings, which allows you to fly. And of course Shadow the Hedgehog would not be Shadow the Hedgehog without his Chaos Control. This completely slows time down, allowing you to hit enemies faster and proceed through the level a lot faster. And all around it's a very good ability. Another thing this game takes from Sonic Generations is the various modes and maps that are used in various other Sonic games. You've got a few fan favourites in here like Rail Canyon from Sonic Heroes, Chaos Island from Sonic Frontiers, and Sunset Heights from Sonic Shit Forces. And the cutscenes even look gorgeous. I don't think any other Sonic game has came close to these types of graphics, and I hope when the franchise eventually goes forward we'll see more of these updated graphics in future games. I also like how they tied this game in with Sonic Generations by giving us the on-screen Shadow and Sonic boss fight like we saw in Sonic Generations previously, and this cutscene now officially looks gorgeous in comparison to Sonic Generations one. And speaking of boss fights, this game does not disappoint in the slightest. Now the game may have less than Sonic Generations, but that definitely doesn't take over the fact that they're actually not as good as the other ones. Like, they absolutely slap. The first boss you face is of course the Bio Lizard from Sonic Adventure, and I'm gonna be honest, it is alright for the first boss. I mean, there's nothing really too special going on here. You hit him a few times and it's pretty much over. However, Metal Overlord is actually a lot better than expected. It takes place fully on water and it uses all the advantages of the Doom Surf, and it's a pretty much good fight all round. And possibly my second favourite boss fight in this whole game has got to be Mephiles, because this fucking slaps. It does take advantage a lot of the Doom Morph, and basically is a very simplistic fight like the lot. But it does have a little bit of challenge to it, which I do like. But the best boss fight on this game has got to be Devil Doom. This thing took full advantage of the whole hub world. And I love that they take advantage of all the Devil Doom powers in this fight. I think it's just absolutely phenomenal. And this is probably since the first time of the opening since we actually get to use the Doom Wings. And you pretty much play a whole level of actually trying to defeat this guy, which is absolutely wild. And shit definitely gets real when he becomes Neo Devil Doom, because it just requires even more manpower. And this is when these beautiful cinematics come into play as you actually eventually end up defeating Neo Devil Doom and saving the universe, which is absolutely wild. This cutscene is insane. I never thought they'd actually do this thing, something this big in a Sonic game, but it's fucking phenomenal. This whole act looks like something straight out of a Sonic movie, let alone Sonic the Hedgehog 3 coming out. Like, they need to take some notes with this one ASAP. And I'm sure in the future they're probably going to try and recreate this scene in this boss fight, but come on, you cannot beat how crazy this thing actually is. and Shadow finally ends his conflict with Devil Doom. So as the first Sonic game I've ever tried out in a while, I have to say that this is definitely up there with the top tier of Sonic games. I mean, these two packs of games are phenomenal, and I think everyone should at least try this out at least once, especially the Shadow campaign. They somehow took an even greater game from 13 years ago and made it even better by adding Shadow into the mix. And there is questions as to why do you think they may have done this, and why do you think they would have included Shadow at all in the story. But it was very clear they had more story to tell, as well as what Shadow was up to during the events of Sonic Generations. And in the process they made an even better game than they did 13 years ago, in my opinion. But it was very clear how Sega was so confident in making this game by taking parts of Sonic Frontiers and making their very own Shadow implementation into the Sonic Generation universe. And by somehow improving the Sonic universe as a whole and the whole timeline of games as a whole. So guys, let me know down below what you think of Sonic and Shadow Generations. Do you think it's a fulfilling fit into the Sonic universe? Do you think they should be making more remasters of Sonic, or do you think they should be going entirely original stuff with Shadow and everything else like that in the future? Or even just combining new original stories with remasters seems to actually be working for Sega just fine. Or would you rather like to see a sequel to Sonic and Shadow Generations by having Shadow Generations as a full-on sequel, and what would you like to see in that game after the events of this game? Feel free to leave your comments and thoughts and opinions down in the comment section down below. And if you guys like this video, you may like this video that's on your screen right now. Take care, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.